Volts log BAC 5808. Anomaly type biological. Description: BAC 5808, also known as the dementia-inducing flatworm, or DIF, is a parasitic creature distantly related to the pork tapeworm. This parasite feeds on the brain and brainstem of its host, and mimics the symptoms of a typical dementia case. Victims of this worm experience memory loss, confusion, reasoning problems, personality changes, and eventually death, similar to dementia spurred by a severe Alzheimer's case. However, the cause in this instance is more insidious. Similarly to the pork tapeworm, it infects its host via ingestion of eggs, which are most commonly found in contaminated meat from an infected animal. While it's most commonly found amongst opportunistic omnivores like pigs, raccoons, and rats, upon extensive testing, this worm has proven capable of infecting all known mammals, including humans. Nature is just so beautiful sometimes. I mean, not right now. This makes me want to shove steel wool in my ear and scrub the folds out of my brain, but I don't know, man. Insert a worm or something. In the later stages of an infection, a secondary transmission vector has been witnessed as well, that being saliva. Eggs have also been observed to spread through spit droplets during coughing, although much more infrequently. One of the key distinctions between Alzheimer's-induced dementia and a DIF infection is that DIF can infect anyone of any age. Although, for one reason or another, they tend to cluster around older populations. Whichever area the worm feeds on will determine the specific symptoms that the individual experiences. But regardless of the parasite location, patients consistently display memory loss, confusion, reasoning problems, and personality changes. One key distinction that often leads the caretaker to discover the parasitic source of the affliction is that these symptoms tend to change sporadically. As the worm moves and interacts with different areas of the brain, new symptoms can arise, or old ones can disappear, seemingly in a matter of moments. While this is not completely out of the ordinary for Alzheimer's, the amount of the symptoms that change, and the rate at which they do, happen much more erratically. Amongst other location-specific symptoms, patients can experience mood swings, loss of balance or motor control, loss of bowel and bladder control, blurred vision, slurred speech, nausea, vomiting, tremors, and strokes. The symptoms are diverse, and it seems as if almost any physiological symptom capable of being spurred by brain activity is possible. Some subspecies of DIF are more active than others. In one extreme case, a man infected with a severe case of dementia-inducing flatworms wandered out into the street and began blocking traffic because he was slowly shuffling in the middle of the road. Upon a woman approaching, asking if he needed help because he looked confused, he had a seizure, projectile vomited into the air, hitting the woman, shit himself in the street, and ran into cross-street traffic, getting struck by a bus. This happened in under 2 minutes. And 4 months later, the woman displayed similar behavior. The worm prefers to feed on neurological systems, but it's most concerned with keeping its host alive for as long as possible. Because of this, the parasite will feed on the host tissues indiscriminately, as well as any calories that the patient ingests. The result is that, rather than the appetite reduction consistent with most cases of mental deterioration, patients with a DIF infection consume far more calories than they would normally. This should also be taken as a sign to investigate potential misdiagnosis of Alzheimer's for DIF infections. DIF can be treated, if caught early enough, using surgical excision of the worm. These methods, while extreme, can be successful in curing a DIF infection. If caught too late, however, the worm will integrate itself with the brain and spinal cord in a way that would kill the patient if it were removed. Even if the worm could be cut out, the brain has been consumed to such a point that it no longer would be different from a regular dementia case. Untreated DIF is eventually fatal, although how long a patient can survive is based on their size, muscle and fat mass, and diet, and can range widely from patient to patient. Individual worms have also been recorded, albeit rarely, transferring from one host to another. DIF is seemingly more intelligent than most arthropods on record.
Probably because it eats all that brain food.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Displaying an IQ equivalent to that of a dolphin, rat, or moderately intelligent Walmart shopper. As the worm ages, if it's not discovered, the older worms become more intelligent with experience operating a human brain, and can even begin to influence the caregivers around its hosts. There's even been cases of adult worms migrating hosts after the demise of their first victim.
They're leaving the nest. They grow up so fast.
The oldest living dementia-inducing flatworm on record was found to be 45 years old. The specimen in question was found living in an extended end-of-life care center, and upon attempted excision from the patient's brain and spinal cord, the flatworm measured a whopping 17 feet long. According to hospital staff, patients in the wing where the parasite was discovered would randomly regain certain mental faculties following the death of a patient in close proximity, who themselves followed the same pattern. Upon taking an MRI of one of these victims, the worm was found coiled around his brain and spine. The patient vehemently resisted the notion of an MRI, suggesting that the worm has at least partial control over the victim's mind. The patient had to be sedated against his will for the scan. The worm later sued for malpractice and won $11 million in damages. In total, before the discovery, this worm had killed a total of 14 patients. Upon attempted surgical excision, the DIF was completely missing from the back of the victim. When interviewed by the local news, the surgeon in question claimed that in his professional opinion, he couldn't remember where he parked his car or why he was in a hospital, and then panicked about being covered in blood and fell down the stairs. BAC agents Larison and Darrenfield created a diversion by blowing up the hospital administrator's car in the parking lot and dragged the doctor's body off for further study. The worm died of blunt force trauma to the doctor's head. A dissection of the specimen was promptly ordered. While the symptoms of a BAC 5808 infestation are indistinguishable from dementia in most manners, there's a few aspects of the parasite that can be identified as red flags. Namely, regular dementia is not infectious, and typically does not afflict 20-year-olds. Whether or not the animal's effect on its host is actually anomalous is still being studied, but it's also classified as an anomaly because of its taxonomy. Bars. The diff was thought to be most closely identified with invertebrate classes of life, but in the most recent dissection, it was found to have an intricate central nervous system with a brain, linked to calcium formations that resemble a spine. Such an animal has never been recorded to exist from a non-anomalous source, and defies our current understanding of evolution via natural selection. Addendum 5808-01. Anomaly Containment Orders. A biological investigation and containment team shall be sent to any place in which there are an exceedingly high diagnoses of Alzheimer's in a short time span. Unusually young Alzheimer's patients shall be subjected to an MRI as part of a first line of inspection and treatment. The meat supply will be consistently monitored for the presence of diff eggs. Those in contact with BAC 5808 should be administered amnestics, or be gaslit, and then be told that gaslighting isn't real and they're just crazy. Yeah, okay, honey, you just could have called me. Well, she didn't ask, so I'm not helping. But I'm asking you to help me. If you liked how I just stole and read Volt's BAC diary, by liking, commenting, and subscribing, or I'll fill your brain with worms. If you'd like to submit a story stolen from a BAC agent, email your submission to azfkcomedy@gmail.com. If you got an idea but you don't want to write a story, just comment it. Maybe I'll take it. Who gives a fuck? If you submit a story, you consent to me reading it on the channel. Shout out the inner circle. Love y'all. Bye.